Hey everyone, welcome back to Slow Your Roll. If you're new here, the only cost of admission is hitting that little subscribe button down below. We're about halfway to the 1,000 subscriber mark, and it's my personal goal to get there this summer. The purpose of today's video is to go through the base camp, and we're going to commission it for this camping season. I'm not sure if commissioning is the right terminology for an RV. It is for a boat, but this thing's essentially a land ship, so we're going to use commission. All right. Anyways, we're de-winterizing the base camp. I put out a previous video on winterizing using an air compressor in lieu of antifreeze. All right, so our water line should be pretty dry. We're going to go in it today, and we're going to basically cover three main categories. The first one is the exterior, where we're going to wash and wax the base camp, make sure all of our seals are ready to go, that the tires are aired up, and that the lug nuts are tight. We're then going to go inside, and we're going to tackle the plumbing. We're going to get the water pump, the water heater, primed up and ready to go. We're going to run the water, make sure there's no leaks in the lines, and then we're going to focus on the electrical system, making sure that we're checking the health of our batteries. Again, if you haven't seen any previous videos, we've got lithium-ion batteries inside. And then we're just going to tighten down all our wires to make sure there's no loose connections. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use the city water to go inside and make sure that none of our lines are leaking and that we've got all the air pressure out of the lines. So we're hooked up to our city water. Our filter is at the closest point to the final destination. All right, we're going to go inside. Turn some lights on in here. All right, let's get in here. Check the toilet. Good. And then finally we'll do the shower. And then we're just going to go check our compartment here. We're just gonna, again, now I'm just visually checking. So the water pump is not primed. We still have this configured so that there's no water going to the hot water heater. I'm going to keep that the same when I clean out and sanitize the fresh water system so that I don't get any bleach in the hot water heater. It's fine to get the bleach through the water pump though. But everything looks good. Looks like we're going to have to rearrange our Havoc wool again. I don't see any leaks. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to fill the fresh tank. So here's the fresh water inlet right here. We'll go inside the base camp. We'll keep a close eye on the fresh tank. Again, if you're unfamiliar with the base camp, these are your level monitors. So if your battery, your fresh, gray, and black. And then if you want to keep it on one of the displays because this is going to time out eventually, you just hold the button until you see that little dot right there, and that'll keep it on so you can continue to monitor it. And while this is filling up, so this is the hose that goes out to the freshwater fill. We're going to just kind of reach our hands along the pipe here just to make sure that it's not leaking. And then it goes down into the tank down there. But so far no puddles or anything like that, so I think we're looking pretty good. The next thing we're going to do is sanitize the freshwater system. In order to do this, we're going to have to introduce bleach into the freshwater system. The recommended percentage is 1/4 cup per 15 gallons. The base camp has a 23-gallon freshwater tank, so I'm just going to estimate a little bit over 1/4 cup and pour it into the fresh tank. And then we'll seal that back up. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to let it sit there for a little while. The recommendation is a minimum of 3 hours, but I want the fresh tank to be nice and cleaned out before I actually start pumping it through the pipes. And then we're going to leave it in the pipes overnight to kill anything that may have grown. Now that the bleach and water has been sitting in the fresh tank for about an hour, the next step is to prime the water pump. So the water pump in the base camp, again, in the roadside compartment here, it's a self-priming pump, meaning you don't have to introduce water into it. Once it feels that there's water in the tank, it'll charge. So we're going to turn that on. And then, as you can hear, it's priming right now. So once that shuts off, you're good to go. So we're going to open up the water. And what we're waiting on is we want to start smelling that bleach. Okay, I can start to smell it now. Even though it's not vital, we're going to do the bathroom as well, just to get bleach in all the lines. And that's pretty much it. So once you've got that bleach smell coming through the faucet in the shower, you're going to let it sit for a minimum of 3 hours. We're going to do more like 12 to 18 hours. So we're going to let it sit overnight until we do step 2 of this process, which is to flush all the bleach out so you don't get that bleach taste and it's just nasty. All right. But in order to do that, we need to be at a location that we can hook our gray tank up and dispose of the water, because we're going to have to run at least probably 2 to 3 cycles through the fresh tank in order to get all that bleach out. All right, so we're going to go to a local campground that's right on Fort Sill. We're going to park it and then hook up to the waste dump and kind of run the water through. So that'll be to be continued tomorrow. When washing the base camp, if you've got the models with the solar guards on the front windows here, really easy process. You just need a Phillips head screwdriver, and you're going to see these Phillips head screws right here. There's 4 because you've got 2 for the far left, 2 for the middle window, and all it is a quarter turn counterclockwise. And then you'll see they pop right out. Again, you're going to want to have help with this, so I'm going to have my wife Laura hold this because it's windy here in Oklahoma. But as you can see, the screw here, it's just, it fits into that grommet. It's a little bit tough getting them back in, but if you have help, it's not a problem. So Laura will have you hold that out, and then you're going to want to walk it that way so you don't get wet. So get up there, clean that. Somehow there's bugs getting on here. But we'll get this nice and clean, and then we'll repeat for the other 2 windows as well. But I won't film that. You get the point. Another thing you're going to want to check while you're doing your cleaning, inspections, etc. is the roof. So the first thing we want to do is we want to make sure we don't see any visible signs of the sealant coming off or gaps in the roof. So we're just going to kind of look along the edges here. Once we're done with that, you're also going to want to make sure if you have solar panels on the top that you clean those off as well. As dust and dirt accumulate, you're not going to be able to get as much power from the sun as it has to get through that barrier. So we just kind of give it a nice little squirt. We can also wash off the vents. For those that don't have solar, just an FYI, that junction box right there, so all the base camps come with that. It's pre-wired for solar, so you can add second or aftermarket panels if that's something you want to do. And then you just plug them in right there. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to try to climb up here and make sure that those connections are nice and secure. I'm not going to do it while holding a GoPro because I don't want to go to the hospital. Let's take a look at the exterior of the base camp here. So I've got a Phillips head screwdriver, and then basically we're just going to do a walk around, and we're going to make sure that all of our screws are tight and all of our fixtures are not going anywhere. So the first thing I'm going to do is start with the front or the side door latch. Just make sure that's in. There's a screw behind there as well that I can't get to, but no big deal. Pay particular attention to these little latches here. These were really loose by the end of last season, and as you can see, the screws have some play in it. So here at the back hatch, I'll try to do it so the sun's not in the way here, but you got this latch here, and again, these were really loose towards the end of last year, so you want to make sure that it's nice and tight. So with that, that's kind of an issue. As you can see, the screws continue to turn, meaning that they're not stopping against anything. So when this thing goes in May, I'm going to have them take a look at that. I did adjust these last year, so they're still pretty tight. So this one's continue to turn as well. Move down here. I'm around to the side here. Make sure these are tight. I'm going to take the screw out and just take a look at it real quick, because that one... Yeah, it looks like... I don't know if they put any Loctite on there, but... Alright, that's it for that side. Go around to the 30 amp service. Looks good. Check that light. Yep, that still works. And go to our exterior solar plug-in. I swear, every fourth screw is just not, it's not in anything. All right, so this is a very important one. You're going to want to make sure that these are all turned and nice and tight, so that while you're driving down the street, these solar panels don't pop off. Same thing with the rock guards too. There's no screw, but you just want to kind of give it a nice little pull to make sure you're good. And same thing over here. All right, that's it for the exterior. You're going to want to do the same thing on the interior. So you're going to want to check all of these buckles to make sure those are tight. And then back here in this rear door, these were getting loose, or some of them were getting loose. Like you can see this one right here. Got a lot of play in it, and as we tighten, it doesn't go into anything, so this screw is not backed into anything. We're gonna have to get that one looked at. That screw is really loose. So going around, I noticed that the track for the screen right here, there's two screws that are out of place, so we're going to attempt to put those back into place. That doesn't seem to be working at all. There we go. Okay, that one's in. Alright, now that one's in. Okay, so those are nice and tight now. Now we're in the battery compartment. I removed the cover here for ease of access and to make viewing easier. While we're in the battery compartment, we're just going to look around again just to make sure we don't see any rusting, any discolorization on any of the terminals here, which could indicate a short or something like that. You're going to need a 1/2 inch socket wrench. Yeah, see, this one's, I don't know if you can see that, but that one's really loose. All right, so we had to call in reinforcements for this one, so I grabbed the 1/2 inch crescent wrench. So we'll attack that from the top. There we go. So now that one's nice and tight. While we're in the battery box, one of the things that I didn't record, but I did add to my electric setup, is this additional disconnect switch. I was noticing that the inverter, even when it's off, has a significant enough parasitic draw that it will draw from the batteries. And we had like 2 weeks of just overcast and rain, and it brought the batteries down pretty low. So what I did was, again, just put this disconnect in, so when I'm not using the inverter, it's in the off position. The inverter's not drawing any battery. If I want to use the inverter, turn that on, and then turn the inverter on. And then I can plug right into here. After letting the bleach solution sit in the fresh tank and the pipes overnight, I have refilled. Well, let's rewind. I completely brought the fresh tank down to about, I want to say 29%. That's kind of 25-29% is kind of where the water pump starts to putter out. But I brought that down to as low as I could by running the water through the sink and the shower. Once that was done, I refilled the fresh tank, and then the basic plan there is that will slosh around as we drive to the dump site. So in addition, what I didn't get it on film, but I filled the black tank up as well, and then added a scoop of Happy Camper, and then same principle, we're gonna let that slosh around as we drive, and that should clean out the black tank as well. All right, so we're at the dump station now, and the first thing I did was flush that black tank. So that's what's going on now. So now we've switched over to the gray tank, and we're going to drain that completely, and I'm just going to keep that open for the next step. All right, I'm going to have to film this inside. I don't know if you can hear outside, but we've got about 30-mile-an-hour winds, so it's tough to film audio outside. So far, we've put 23 gallons of the bleach to water ratio through the freshwater system. I just finished 23 gallons, thereabout, 23 gallons of pure water, no bleach. You can still smell bleach coming out of the faucet. So I'm filling up the freshwater tank one more time. And I think that should get it to where it needs to be. What I'm also going to do is, before I leave here, I'm going to fill up the fresh tank, and then I'm just going to keep the drain valve open so that whatever's in there will just flow out over the course of the next few hours. Just a note, while you're doing this process, you don't want to burn your water pump out, so make sure your tape breaks in between, like every 20-25 gallons or so. Shut it off for a couple minutes. It shouldn't overheat as long as water's going through it, but just in case. And then once you've gotten a few tanks through, just hook up your water to your city water system. That'll bypass the water pump, and then you can continue to cycle water through the hoses without having to worry about the water pump burning out. As I'd mentioned earlier, I ran the second fresh water through. Now I'm going to do it a third time. We're going to fill up the fresh tank all the way, and what we're going to do is we're just going to let it drip out over the next few hours. So that'll be the third 23 gallons, not running through the pipes, just making sure that there's nothing residual in the tank. Once that's done, I'm going to switch the water from the freshwater tank to the city, and we're going to run it. We're going to continue to run it while I work on some other projects. That'll make sure there's nothing in the freshwater pipes. Now we need to talk about wheels and making sure that your lug nuts are tight and that your tire pressure is to the manufacturer's specs. So I won't film this process. We just filled up the tires about a month ago, and I checked them and they're still at PSI, which is what the Airstream Basecamp 20 is recommended. And 80 PSI is extremely high, and probably the reason why yard sales in here every time you go down the road is because it's very, very hard. Now, what I recommend if you do any off-roading, or if you're going to take this thing in sand or less than forgiving terrain, I would recommend you get an air down kit, such as the ARB. That's the one I have. Basically, you just tighten that onto the valve stem. It pulls the valve stem out, and then it releases air to the desired pressure. And then again, on top of that, I have the Vi-Air tire air compressor, which hooks up to the battery of my tow vehicle, and I always keep that with me in the car so that I can air up. Most gas stations that you go to, the free air that they have, the machines usually only go up to about 50 to 55 PSI. So it's just a good idea to have that with you. In addition, you're going to want to invest in a half drive torque wrench that has the foot-pounds down here, so that you can the torque strength in foot-pounds on this thing. So if you look at the Basecamp 20 owner's manual and you go to section 8, that's all about tires and maintenance and stuff like that. First of all, they're aluminum rims, and the specified torque weight pounds is 100. These, you just adjust this by pulling down and then twisting the handle until you get to the desired foot poundage. So I've got it on 100. I don't know if you'll be able to see that. And then the only other thing you're going to need is one of these. You're going to need a 13/16 socket, and you may need an adapter because this is a 1/2 inch torque wrench. All right, but all this stuff I think I picked up at Harbor Freight. Just remember what your dad taught you, the principles of tightening and loosening nuts. Righty tighty, lefty loosey. All right, so you'll just fit the torque wrench onto the lug. And again, you may need an extender because the wheel fairing gets in the way here. But you're just going to press down until you hear that click. Some of these, they make them where they're digital, and it'll actually have a readout on here to tell you if you've hit the desired torque. But it's as simple as that. And you're going to want to do this at least a couple times a year. But there are specified periods, especially like when you first get the Basecamp. Like after that first trip, you're going to want to make sure you tighten these down. All right, so the last thing we're going to check on the Basecamp is the propane system. So we'll go out front, again, just talking you through it inside the Basecamp without the wind, and then I'll just dub this over if you can't hear me outside. So we keep this inside the Basecamp to wash dishes. All it is liquid soap and water. So that's all you need to do is go in the front, turn on the propane, spray it down, and see if you've got any bubbles forming. So we've got the left propane, the left system on. Alright, it's interesting. If you can see right here, there's a little bit of bubbling outside. Here, let's try that again. Yeah, you see that? We've got a propane leak. Alright, so we switched up the propane tanks. I put the good full tank on the right-hand side. So we're going to spray that now. Okay, this one looks good. Let's go inside the Basecamp. Now we're going to check to make sure that the stove's working. If you haven't used propane for a while, there may not be propane in the lines. So if it doesn't light right away, don't worry about it. Just kind of let it run. Make sure that there's the doors are open, that you get some ventilation in here. But let that run a little bit till you can smell the propane. There you go. Alright, so we got that burner working. That burner is working. Perfect. So you'll remember when we winterized this thing, we changed the pipes around. So right now the hot water heater is bypassed. So we're going to reverse that. So what we need to do is we need to open up the hot line, open up the cold line, and then we're going to shut off the mixing valve. So I don't know if you heard that, but you could hear a rush of water coming through here. So now what I want to do is I want to make sure that the hot water heater works now that I've got the propane on. We'll turn our Suburban on. This should be self-priming, so we're going to turn it on hot. All right, you can hear it firing. Good, we've got hot water. All right, friends, so that's it. It really is that easy to get your RV, in this case Basecamp, ready for the camping season. To recap, we covered the exterior. We washed and waxed it to protect the body. We cleaned off our solar panels to make sure that we're getting the most charge we can. We went around to our wheels, made sure that all our fittings and our hardware, as far as latches, covers, all that, were screwed on tight and secure. We brought it to the inside. We checked out the battery, made sure that our battery cables were tight, that we didn't see any evidence of arcing or bad connections. We brought it over to the plumbing. We sanitized our freshwater system. We went through all our plumbing. We made sure that there was no leaks in any of the pipes from over the winter. And we also got our hot water heater going. We checked out our propane system. We found a leak, and that's exactly why you do these checks. That's the end of this video. Again, please, if you haven't done so, click that subscribe button, and we'll come up with some more topics to film and adventures to put out there on the tube. Until then, we'll see you guys later. Thanks again for watching.